Okay, hi everybody, and we're beginning a new series. This is Michael Robbins, and I'm talking here in the Temple of Silence, which is our temple, Tuya's and mine, and in the Northern Light Society. Hopefully, someday you'll be able to come to Finland and meditate with us at some of the events that we hold here. I'm going on now, having completed the compilations I was using for the third initiation and the second initiation. And yes, there is always more to say. I will be working now on the first initiation, going backwards a little bit, I think, but this is the birth of the Christ in the heart. The center, of course, is the heart center is always involved because we're bringing in the energy of Buddhi into the causal body increasingly with each initiation and into the vehicles of the personality. The energy of love is entering with each initiation. So the birth of the heart, the birth in Bethlehem, the birth of the Christ in the heart, that's the first. The baptism or purification is the second initiation. The transfiguration, illumination, or enlightenment, Satori, that's the third initiation. The fourth initiation is the crucifixion or the great renunciation. The fifth initiation is sometimes called resurrection, but it's not. It's the revelation is the term DK gives for it. The sixth initiation is the great decision. And the seventh initiation is the true resurrection onto the highest levels of the cosmic physical plane. And then we go on to initiations which are normally not taken within the confines of our particular planet. Let's see, I don't want this to be too loud. Oh, maybe it's too soft. All right, we'll try it that way. Okay, hopefully that's reasonable. Not sure, but we'll see. Eighth initiation, which gives you sort of a back and forth relationship with the cosmic astral plane, called the transition. And the ninth initiation, the refusal, the great refusal, and that it locates you permanently on the cosmic astral plane and beyond. At least it's the beginning of the travels to whatever plane the particular path upon the way of higher evolution leads. So the leading of these paths, there are now 9 of them, and we cannot say what the next 2 will be, but interestingly enough, there are 7 major Pleiades, and all paths eventually end in those 7 and probably are focused in one of the 7 Pleiades, but the Pleiades have an associated father and mother. They have a star called Atlas and a star called Pleione. That's the father and mother, and maybe the 9 initiations, which always lead to the Pleiades, involve Atlas and Pleione in some way. Well, these are more issues that would be taken up by the great beings for whom they are more immediately relevant. We will be I will say we'll be doing well if we can control our emotions and our astral body, so to speak, and move on to the path of Syrian initiation, which doesn't necessarily mean the path to Sirius, but it's sponsored by Sirius, and achieve, excuse me, the very first real initiation, which is the third initiation of transfiguration, not an initiation of the threshold. So that's where we are. We're beginning a lot of information to put together here. And basically, when the 5th petal of the egoic lotus is completely open, and the 7th petal is showing signs of development, and the 6th, of course, somewhere in between, then we have the completion of the first initiation. It's not a low initiation. Some people just kind of brush it aside and say, oh, well, everyone has done that. But that's not true. Everyone has not done that. And even one of the disciples one of the accepted disciples in the Tibetan group, accepted, we understand, for his own protection, had thus far failed to stand before the Christ, even for the first time. Well, there are exceptions to rules. All the rest of DK students stood on the periphery of the ashram and had taken the first degree, and some were even, most were candidates at one time or another for the second degree, whether it was going to be in that particular life or a couple of lives ahead. And maybe there were some that would be candidates for the third. And Alice Bailey and I think Roberto Assagioli would be candidates for the fourth degree. I can't say with any kind of conviction about Foster Bailey, but he was an advanced soul to be taking the same secretarial position in Master Moria's ashram as Alice Bailey was taking in KH's ashram. Well, these are matters of some interest. DK would say maybe they're not so important, and that so much of the detail we want to know about the Master's lives is really irrelevant to us, and somewhat the cause of glamour, as it tends to involve interest in status, and the minute we have this interest in the status of the initiates rather than in the qualities that they express and in the qualities we are expressing, we're already back into the realm of lower ego, which initiation is meant to transcend step by step. So I've, over the years, many kind people, and I've contributed to it too, have provided compilations, and these compilations are to a degree complete or not complete. When I'm looking at this compilation here on the first initiation, it's 19 pages long at a pretty big font. I don't think it's complete by any means, but then I will go and study other entries that have perhaps not been entered here, and by the time we're finished with it, we should have a pretty good discussion of the major references involving the first initiation. So what I'll do here, as I often do, should do anyway, we'll call it, this is the beginning. That's English United States. We don't want that, huh? We want English United Kingdom. Okay, so this is the beginning. Okay, UK, BGN. No, I don't know what's going on here. No, it's not. Well, I'll have to spell it out. No, it still says United States. That's the problem. So this is set as default. Yes, yes. Beginning, yeah. Of first initiation compilation. And what I'll do here is when I write these letters, FIC, what I'll do is hope that they register first initiation compilation. All right, so beginning of first initiation compilation, and we'll call this program number 1. Now you'll be able to pick these programs up on Makara, www.makara.us, or go to YouTube for Moria Federation Esoteric Education. Our goal here with the Moria Federation is to move towards the new esoteric schools, which Master DK has predicted will emerge first in their preparatory examples and then in their advanced, 7 preparatory and 7 advanced, and eventually any nation of any status relatively developed nations will have their own esoteric schools. And those nations in which it's possible that the soul energy can emerge, and not those nations, I suspect, which are just sort of working on the integration of the of aspects of the personality. All right, so this will be a discussion of compilations, discussion of paragraphs within a compilation. They will not be in order, but they will be in book order and page order in that way. And as I said before, the juxtaposition of some of these ideas may make a new kind of light flash forth, and a kind of light that we didn't see when we were simply studying in the horizontal read through the book manner. Master DK said, do study topically, and you're really going to learn something by the amassing of similar reference points in the same place. So here's something called the key features of the first initiation. It's from Destiny of the Nations, or DON, or I don't know how we want to, DOTN, Destiny of the Nations. And it says the intensification of the life of the human center will proceed apace, because after all, humanity, not every human being, but humanity considered as a whole, is about ready to take the first initiation. And when the Christ appears, it will be reappears. It will be an indication that indeed that portion of humanity that was to take the first initiation, thus elevating, leavening the whole, has taken that initiation. So that's going to be quite an intensification, because then the way of the soul is the primary way to tread, and not the satisfaction of the desires of the personality. For a long time there is a battle, of course, and maybe only after we've passed the temptations in the desert does the battle somewhat subside, and the majority then is on the side of the soul, and we do the things that we as a soul indicate or wish to see done, especially with our help from the solar angel, angel of the presence. So the intensification of the life of the human center will proceed apace, and this is the reason why so many people, as I have earlier hinted, will take the first initiation. And they know the numbers. We don't know the numbers, but some millions, I suppose. Students are apt to forget that the first initiation can be described in reality as. So let's look at this. A grounding or externalization of the Christ principle in humanity as a whole and upon the physical plane, and we might say through the etheric physical body. It's an initiation in which the etheric body begins to dominate the instincts of the physical body, and through the etheric body can come in those higher energies which naturally control the tendencies of the physical body. It's kind of a seventh-ray thing. Order and control are possible when the etheric body is consciously under our attention and administration, and the lower aspect, the dense aspect of our nature, does not have its way with us any longer. We can control that, maybe not perfectly at the first degree, but to a sufficient extent so that the lower instincts do not run away with us. And some of the 7 deadly sins, maybe lust and maybe gluttony. I don't have my list of the 7, maybe sloth. I don't know. There are a number of these 7 deadly sins, and some of them relate to the dense physical body most of all, and they are better controlled now with the first initiation. Okay, what else happens? The flowering of the intelligence, because the throat center will be involved, so that the initiate can work powerfully upon the mental plane, depending upon the ray, I would say, but more powerfully, and humanity itself be lifted up and be aided throughout every part thereby. So let's just say the intelligence begins to carry the quality of the soul. Now you can be, very smart, very intelligent, selfishly intelligent, but that's not the flowering of intelligence. That's not Venus. Venus is the flower, and Venus is the planet of the higher mind. It's the planet of the angel of the presence and of the solar angel. And that is what it means for intelligence to really flower, not that it's just cunning and clever and able to get one's own desires satisfied. So we've got the grounding or externalization of the Christ principle. That's one of the factors that the first initiation will mean, I suppose, especially when it is talking about the human center per se, and in every individual, right? The flowering of intelligence, that's another. And then the coming into activity of the throat center in a higher creative way. And because the third ray is closely connected with the first ray, all initiations have to do with starting something new and breaking into new territory. That's always the first ray. And then the personality is oftentimes, we're told, on the third ray, when that clearinghouse, solar plexus is a clearinghouse for energies, throat center is a clearinghouse for energies. When the first initiation is about to be taken, frequently the personality is upon the third ray. Now, I don't know how that is when the soul is also on the third ray. Maybe not, maybe the personality would be more the seventh ray there, and the mind the seventh ray, because it's unusual until later stage of evolution. But he doesn't elaborate on this too much, except in the chapter on the integration of the personality for the first ray. But it's unusual to have the soul ray and the personality ray the same. It does tell us a later stage of advancement for the first ray soul, first ray personality. It can happen, but there's been a lot of development that's gone on before that makes that possible, so that the balance can be preserved. And I would not say that the first initiation is the indicator of such a possibility of balance, necessary balance. The coming into activity of the throat center, and the first faint orientation of the spiritual man towards Shambhala can take place. And why is this? Because, unknown to the man in his physical brain, the monad has affected or lodged itself or influences the soul. So the physical brain doesn't know that. But even at the first degree, the monad is making its presence felt within the soul body, within the egoic lotus. So that's the first orientation of the spiritual man toward Shambhala. The monad is pretty much Atma Buddhi, and the Buddhi part of it is very necessary. And the Buddhi part really begins at the first initiation. Well, it has been growing, of course, as love has been growing, but this higher type of love begins its development there, really, at the first initiation. Not so much the personal kind, but the kind that embraces others and other beings because of their soul quality. So the first faint orientation of the spiritual man toward Shambhala can take place because, after all, there's an orientation towards the soul, and the soul is the heart center. It's been called of the monad, and the monad is a resident. What does that mean? Well, a resident of Shambhala, becoming more and more intensified and pronounced at the time of the third initiation. So even, the third eye begins its development at the first initiation, and is useful as an instrument without being psychically contaminated, if I could only type, at the third initiation. So the monad comes into conscious recognition at the third initiation, and it comes into influence, but into on CNS influence at the first initiation. So what that really means is that all of us are essentially the monad, and I think, many in the Alice Bailey movement have taken the first initiation, not necessarily all, but if you have or are close to the requirements there to fulfilling those requirements, the monad has made its presence felt within your egoic lotus, even if the brain consciousness doesn't carry it. But more and more conscious we will become of these inner spiritual movements and impressions and influences. And that is, part of the reward to become more conscious on the path of spiritual development. Okay, so what do we have here? The coming into activity of the throat center, because basically what happens at the first initiation is there's a focus on the sacral center under Uranus, which is a major planet at every initiation, and even starts at the first, and it's the ruler of the seventh ray, and it's the ruler generically of the etheric body, and it's a Uranus-Saturn kind of thing, with Saturn and the moon in a way ruling the denser part of man at that stage. So, and Uranus even rules the throat center at a certain stage as the seventh ray begins to take over there. Seventh ray being so very, very important at that first initiation. So there's an elevation going on of the energies of the sacral center, the procreative energies, the sexual energies, up to the throat, which are the creative energies, not procreative, although, he does tell us a time when procreation will be accomplished in a different manner, and it almost seems like the physical vehicles needed by the incarnating soul will be, if I can put it this way, spoken into existence or sung into existence. Making music together, as it were, to provide the vehicle for the incoming soul. Somewhere he mentions that. It's a long time ago I read it. The thing about reading the Tibetan is, you remember certain things and then they slot in, they come in maybe unexpectedly when you need them, and they form a new relationship with an item of information that you may be studying at the moment. And then new patterns begin to appear based upon old reading and old memories within the books, and a new light arises. So indeed, you get quite a pointed tower rising as you memorize what is in the books and then bring them together, and the arcing occurs, new light appears, and there's really an intensification of the light as we begin to rise in correlation. Rise in correlation. It's a Mercury thing, and the Tibetan is very much, in a sense, Mercury. He's the messenger, or, well, maybe not the only one, but he's the messenger of the hierarchy. He's very Gemini in certain ways. He's very Mercury in certain ways. And when I look at his, or the various pictures purported to be of him, there seems to be a strong Taurus factor linking him to Buddhism and linking him to that great light from the mother of illumination. It's a very bright part of the sky, the Taurus Gemini part of the sky, and the Tibetan is a source of tremendous light. Okay, so these three factors can be described regarding the first initiation: grounding, flowering, and coming into activity. Okay. Now, basically, friends, what we're having here is kind of a study group, really. I'm free associating on certain things I read, and you're thinking about it as I talk about it, and different impressions are being made upon your mind and different connections. Things are coming to light which you may not have thought about before. Things are coming to light which I may not have thought about before. That always happens when I start to read these things in your presence and for the sake of increasing the light. Thousands of people have taken, okay, this is still, should I just leave it, Destiny of the Nations, DN? I will for the moment. It is seldom realized, and this is, written after World War II, the Destiny of the Nations, for the emerging political workers, I guess, that hundreds of thousands of people in every land have taken or are preparing to take this first initiation called the Birth of Bethlehem in the House of Bread. Aleph Bet Gimel. It's the bet. It's the second letter of the alphabet. It's having something to do with the second ray, Bethlehem and the house of bread. Bread, of course, is prana in another way. But at least we have this, hundreds of thousands. And, elsewhere, he's going to mention the word millions will have taken this initiation. Humanity, the world disciple, not just the world aspirant, but now perhaps very much so because of the Great War, which probably a lot of us have been through and have forgotten, but the marks are upon us. The suffering is there, and the new possibilities of elevation are there. A lot of my friends in the work, they have memories of the last war. They were like killed as a fighter pilot, or in a concentration camp, or they have these memories. And one even showed me kind of a scar that carried over from the inner planes where he had been shot in the previous war. Well, these things are certainly possible. Humanity, the world disciple, is now ready for this. Indications of the accuracy of the above statement can be seen in the reorientation of people everywhere to things spiritual, their interest in human good and human welfare, the perseverance they show in their search for light, and their longing and desire for true peace based on right human relations and implemented by goodwill. Quite a statement. Now, after all of this was written, this tremendous surge in the interest in consciousness studies came, and the 60s and the 70s came, and though, yes, there was a reaction, and there still is a reaction. And as the door to hierarchy is about to open and the Christ is about to appear, there is a tremendous reaction by the forces of materialism within ourselves. The personal aspect of us is reacting against this. And in every nation that has a given soul ray and personality ray, the fight between the soul and personality is being waged at this moment. And you can just see it as you go from country to country. And at the moment, this is 2018, it's very acute in the United States, where we would expect and hope that the soul would emerge. So this mind as it is in Christ, and that's what we have to pray for. I ask not every day, but most days, to have established in my consciousness the mind as it is in Christ. This mind as it is in Christ can be seen in their revolt against materialistic religion and in the widespread effort to be seen in Europe and elsewhere to return to the land, Mother Earth, the true Virgin Mary, and to the people. Well, I do believe, this was written early on after the war. I do believe. It can be seen in the constant movement. This is Uranus, of people throughout the world from place to place. Mercury is about movement, and Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury, symbolized in the gospel story by the journey of Mary and the infant Jesus into Egypt. So the migrations are underway, and what the richer nations shall now do with the migrant crisis here in this year 2018 and for several past years is on the front burner. Our quality of soul, quality of heart, quality of love, quality of intelligence are all being tested as to how to handle the migrant situation. Of course, we're all migrants, and we've been migrating from incarnation to incarnation, being born here, being born there. The Dalai Lama did say, well, not everybody can move to Europe. Well, it was somewhat humorous, but it's true. We have also to try to make better the place in which we find ourselves, and not just hope, as is perfectly natural to the human psyche, that somewhere else it'll be better and get me out of here so I can be in that someplace else which is better. Sometimes you have to migrate because your life is threatened, and it's often happened that people have to move on when they're being persecuted, and there has to be a discrimination, I think, between those who flee because of persecution and those who flee for the purpose of selfish desire. Things are just better elsewhere, and they want that betterness. So, we're all trying to work that out right now. But may the mind as it is in Christ be in our consciousness, and may our spiritual studies and what really is for the good of humanity and human welfare, and what is really the light, and what is really peace, and what are really right human relations, all of this emerge into our understanding. So may all of these good possibilities emerge into our understanding. It's all very practical. I mean, the Tibetan knows so much, and his knowledge extends into beyond the planet, but certainly in the higher reaches of the planet, and into the solar system, and beyond the solar system, and into the into the zodiac, and beyond. It's a vast knowledge he has, but his is the ability to bring right down onto the physical plane so many of the immediate necessities, and he shows himself thereby to be an externalizing master. Maybe not all masters would externalize, but he certainly shows himself, in my opinion, to be an externalizing master, because he moves towards Shambhala at the same time he moves towards humanity. And for us, we have to move towards hierarchy at the same time as we move towards humanity, with greater sensitivity also to the will and to Shambhala. So a lot of people have taken this initiation, and I think we can assume that a lot of people that we serious students of the Tibetan work with have taken this. If you stick with these Theosophical Master DK studies for years and years and years, and they are the very breath of life to you, and you try to apply what you learn through goodwill and love, well, there's a good possibility that the first initiation is under your belt. Of course, it's really not under your belt, it's above your belt, as it were, because the energies do rise up into the higher chakras. All right, what else? Right. Subsequent lives of no growth, seemingly. Well, I would remind you here that many, many lives can elapse between the first initiation and the second, long, long interludes of silent and almost unapparent growth, lest we become discouraged. We're now in the Discipleship book, lest we become discouraged. Now, in one of the books that we just recently read, he says many lives. Now he says many, many. And then what was really interesting to me was that one of the books about the second initiation showed us that one life, or maybe two, or several, could elapse. So the time equation is elastic. It's flexible, and I think it's very much in our hands, and it has to do with the will to sacrifice. Like one of my friends said, Christ made such great progress because he had a really good solar angel, but I don't think that we can say that is the case. Somehow our will is really free. That's the amazing thing. And we, somehow in the depths of us, we really do have the choice as to how we will exert that will. It's not that we are compelled, because finally, when it comes to the will, the great will aspect, there's no other will to compel it. It's the one and only will in all of cosmos. Of course, there are higher aspects of the will, but we are not being made into automatons. And from another perspective, it's the law. It's a Syrian law, probably the Syrian law of freedom, that the White Lodge cannot compel the will. It can only invite, it can only spread the light, it can only educate, it can draw forth, but it cannot make us do anything. So I'd like to, if I could find that, that's the question. I just don't know. Can I find it? And can I find it in any second initiation compilation? Okay, so maybe here, use this. Right. This is all about the second initiation. And I do believe, I'm trying to see if down there at the bottom of it all is this little discussion, and maybe not. Not what I'm looking for. I'll try one other thing. And second initiation. Okay, well, look, I actually found it. Page 120 of Initiation, Human and Solar. At the first initiation, he becomes definitely aware of the part, relatively inconspicuous, that he has to play in his personal life during the period ensuing between the moment of revelation. That's a type of revelation. It's not the same as the revelation at the fifth initiation, which reveals the ways of high revolution, and the taking of the second initiation. And this is the point. This may involve one more life. This may involve one more life or several. But it's not the same thing as many, or many. So it's just obvious that we have in our capacity the ability to move ahead with managing the time equation in a way which many do not bother to manage. Initiation is not given or accorded to those who are careless or of the requirements, nor to those who are so fixated upon it that they forget its purpose and want to pursue it for egotistical reasons. And we do have that kind of spiritual selfishness which does emerge. So, some of you who are working with people and trying to help people, it's very likely that the first initiation may be coming upon them, and that they have to prepare through a discipline and beautification of their life and interest in the spiritual studies for that initiation. The requirements are simple in some ways and difficult to execute. So many lives, many can continue, but let's just put it this way. Keep in mind Initiation, Human and Solar, page 120, where one more life or several are discussed in relation to the taking of the second initiation. Now, we might, in reading the Tibetan, just read one reference and somehow fix it in our mind, but the relativity of the interactions in time and space are forgotten by us, and DK may say something apparently different altogether, but it's not really different. It just depends upon the place where you stand, the perspective that you have, the strength of your will, these kinds of, and your ability to sacrifice. That's the thing, As Master Moria said, it really branded itself in me. When have you ever become less through sacrifice? He said that. And it gives you pause, doesn't it? It's, who do we admire the most when we see even some beautiful sacrifice of an animal, like a dog saving its master's children or something like that. I just saw the other day that a dog, big dog, grabbed a little toddler and by whatever the toddler was wearing and threw him several feet away. And why was that? Was this an attack? But there it was. One of the most poisonous of the Australian snakes was there and about to bite the baby, and instead it bit the dog. But, they realized what had happened and the dog survived. But there was an act of sacrifice. And when we see this showing up in people, real, genuine sacrifice because there is love, wow, then it really does something to you. It always melts my heart, when I see that, and I just, even when I think of the words, it chokes me up. So we follow those who sacrifice. At first, the sacrifice may just be sacrificing your sleep and your bodily welfare and stuff like that. But later, it's the very sacrifice of your incarnational life. Greater love hath no man than that he lay down his life for a friend. And when your friend is all of humanity, oh, think about that, hierarchy, friendship in its truest sense, beyond criticism and backbiting and beyond suspicion, beyond all those things which seem to divide one individual from another. Right, well, here we are in Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 1. We've talked about the stages of discipleship: little chelaship, chela in the light, accepted discipleship, chela on the thread, chela in the aura, chela in the master's heart, and then the final seventh stage, the blending of the lights, where we're talking really about two masters, and we're not, we're no longer in the master's ashram for the most part, although Master DK, as I say, does have somehow 5 masters in his ashram. How many more must Master KH have? All right, so here's this stage of little chelaship. It's associated with the first initiation. These stages are all of them related to one or other of the initiations. Okay, very interesting. This one called little chelaship is related to the first initiation. That's going to help us, and also the kind of work we have to do between initiations, as we always have to do work in expressing what was revealed, even if we've forgotten the exactitude of revelation. It's in us, So we have to express and that which has been revealed to us. So this one's called little chelaship, related to the first initiation. This initiation is connected with the physical plane, and for a very large number of people, as I have several times pointed out, lies far behind. A very large number, probably hundreds of thousands, and even as DK begins to discuss millions. And then here comes this statement, all true aspirants have taken the first initiation. I mean, you can be an aspirant, but now this is a true aspirant. And basically it means that the true aspirant to accepted discipleship has taken the first initiation. The fact is indicated by, and this is one of the requirements we have to keep in mind as we see what it is that they have to do. And let's see what it is they have to do. The fact is indicated by their intensive struggle to grow into the spiritual life. Remember, man is a fourth ray being. He struggles to follow the way of determined orientation to the things of the spirit. Isn't that Sagittarian, First degree is Sagittarius, he tells us, and second degree too, and to live by the light of that spirit. Okay, so what do we have here? Basically, we have struggle, following, and we have following and orientation, and then we have living. Now, sometimes you can take a word and it will help you create a peg in your mind so that you can come back to it. What we want to do is have a list of requirements for each initiation. And that list will help us fulfill those requirements. If we're careless about fulfilling the requirements, we're just not going to get there, and at any time we could fail in our normal daily life. Right there I didn't fulfill a requirement. I was critical, I was unloving, I was lazy. I went this way and that way and did other things instead of the thing that needs to be done. I just didn't translate it into my expression in my daily life. We have to always, it's called the inner monitor. You always have to monitor what you're doing. Keep your eye on what you're doing without becoming obsessed by it. But there is a higher point of vantage, a higher point of observation. And while we're doing whatever we're doing, that higher point of observation can also be in working, in process. All right, so this is the stage of little Chelaship, and I wonder if we went through it, what we would find, Maybe Chela in the Master's Heart is the 4th degree, maybe Chela in the Aura is the 3rd degree, maybe accepted discipleship is connected pretty much with the orientation to the 2nd degree, and Chela on the thread is connected with the approach to the 3rd degree. So accepted discipleship, not always, but gives you an approach to the 2nd degree. This is my opinion. And then Chela on the thread will give you an approach to the 3rd degree. As DK said about accepted discipleship, it's not necessarily a question of your attainment. It's a question of your relationship to a certain master. So you might be quite highly attained and not be an accepted disciple. You're just kind of forging ahead on your own pretty much. But you might have a lower degree of attainment and be accepted by a master because he knows you, he's worked with you, you've been related to him. It's a different kind of relationship. But then all of Master DK's students eventually, if they didn't drop out, if they made their way to the 24 group of 24, the reorganized new C group, they were going to be accepted disciples. 24 is so interesting because if you look at the advanced new schools, the diagram we're given shows us 24 students and 3 teachers, or whatever teachers are at that stage, 3 guides. And so 27 altogether, very interesting. And from 27 also comes into play when we take 3 members of each of the first 9 C groups and then look at the 10th C group, and it's going to be 3 times 9 is 27. So all of these numbers have significance, and we store them in our mind, and they may be relevant at a certain point, when we have to make a decision. Alice Bailey said, please have the well-stocked mind. It doesn't mean when you've got a customer in the store, you pull everything off the shelves. A customer is the person with whom we are talking and whose life we want to contribute to, and we may take something off the shelf, which is useful, and not everything. All right, so what's this? Anyway, so that Chela in the Light, 1st degree, little Chelaship, 1st degree, Chela in the light, it's a period before accepted discipleship, between the 1st and 2nd degree, accepted discipleship between the 1st and 2nd degree, leading to the 2nd degree and participating in the 2nd degree, and going on, accepted disciples are existing, and technically the name is no longer used when you become an initiate of 3rd degree. Chela on the thread, maybe you've passed the temptations in the desert. Okay, with accepted discipleship, maybe you haven't passed them yet, but you can be accorded the attention of the master with Chela on the thread if you pass those. That's my opinion at the moment, and that leads to the 3rd degree. Chela in the aura, the 3rd degree. Chela in the master's heart, 4th degree. The blending of the lights, 5th degree. This is how I presently see it. Now, if I have a real discussion with my friend Eleanor Dramcini, who's an expert on these matters, she might see it a little differently. I guess we all have our areas of focus in the great teaching. We can't do it all. We can't memorize it all. We can't be in all places at the same time, even if as a spirit we are. So we have to be somewhat selective as to what we do. All right, what's the next one? Isolated identity. Now, I don't know what initiation this is yet because it's a little bit out of context. This initiation must ever precede the stage of accepted discipleship. I suppose it's the 1st degree. So it sounds like the 1st degree. Now, here was the thing, though. One of the disciples, he was the 3rd ray soul. He did a lot to finance the Tibetan's books, and he was a great devotee of the Tibetan, but he was in trouble. And we were told he was in danger in his last life of veering off onto the left-hand path, and his rays even now were difficult. Third ray soul, sixth ray personality, fifth ray mind, first ray astral body, third ray physical body, difficult rays. So for his own protection, DK created that link with him, which was the link of an accepted disciple. No master accepts the disciple and takes him into his ashram, in whom the birth of the Christ has not taken place. Well, okay, yes, but there's always exceptions, and we were given that very interesting exception with LTSK was his motto name, and he had, there were a couple of disciples who had a lot of trouble, but LTSK and LUT were the two who had a lot of trouble. But LUT, who was a Taurus, to be a Scorpio in his next life, had taken the first degree and made a great sacrifice for the Tibetan. And you could see that LTSK also, obviously a fairly rich man in business, also was making a sacrifice for the Tibetan in the publishing of his books and financing those things. And as DK said, we are not ungrateful. So usually it is the case, almost always it is the case, that we cannot be accepted until we've taken the first degree. Saul must become Paul. Okay, Saul of Tarsus, pressing forward on the road to Damascus, must become Paul the apostle, Paul the disciple. Paul being substituted, he says, for Judas to round out the 12, that ashram of the Christ. Saul must become Paul in all of our lives. Are we Saul or are we Paul? Now, of course, Saul was already a high initiate. He was already an initiate of the second degree as, coming into life, and he was a fanatic in many ways. And he would become Paul at a higher degree, let us say, at the third degree, and it looks like he went on to sacrifice his life at the fourth degree. That's what it looks like to me. And maybe as, is it Hilarion Iamblichus? As a Neoplatonist, maybe he took the fifth degree. As the Christian phraseology puts it, Saul must become Paul. That's true for all of us. We must become spiritualized. The babe within the womb of time, and that's our consciousness. Really, if you look at it, this is our consciousness, emerges into the world of men, and from the standpoint of complete identification with matter, he becomes himself and seeks consciously to tread the ways of life and to become what he is. So, eventually we think we are matter, but we're not. We identify with a personality only to repudiate it under the law of repulse. So this is an esoteric repetition of the physical process of becoming a separate individual. We're born into mass consciousness, and eventually we know in the transition from Cancer to Leo, hey, I'm the point. I'm not just everybody, I'm not just doing everything the tribe does. I am who I am, and I have my own thoughts. And then on a higher turn of the spiral, we learn how to disidentify from the material element and become who we are spiritually as a soul. Between the stages of isolated individuality, which I suppose is the earlier part of becoming Leo and coming to yourself and I am who I am, and isolated unity in which we identify the great being in whom we live and move and have our being, or identify as that great being, lies one to which we give the name isolated identity. Now here, this really, really important sentence, and something we should keep in mind, absolutely. I've read this so many times, but I'm just impressed always by how important it is between the stages of isolated individuality. And a lot of people find themselves, something, I think there's a statement even with cancer about this, and yet the crowd exists. Let me go to that, Esoteric Astrology, page 332. And it is The blind unit is lost. And yet no, it's something else. It's something else. I'll look at it this way. The blind unit is lost, and yet the crowd, what about the crowd? Yet let isolation be the rule, and yet the crowd exists. So that's mass consciousness, and there's the I am that stage, which is the lower part of the next and succeeding stage. So here we have to emerge out of this crowd, out of this mass consciousness. We are isolated within it. We don't really have soul relations. The crowd does exist. We're surrounded by those with whom we have superficial relations, but eventually we will have soul relations. So let's remember, I'm telling myself, have I memorized this properly? Let isolation be, isolated individuality, isolated identity, and isolated unity. Isolated unity is what I'm always striving for. It's a first-rate thing, but I think we can all develop a kind of isolated unity where we isolate being in our everyday life. We always see that all things are identical in that they are. All things are identical in that they are. They share being, and quality doesn't make any difference. It is with this stage that we are concerned, and its esoteric implications. Isolated unity describes a stage which the master has reached, and it really, around the third degree, I think you can achieve something of it which is real. Isolated individuality is that of the disciple. He has become, well, maybe you're not even an individual before you're a disciple. He has become a real identity and distinctive. And an earlier stage of isolated individuality might be said we emerge from the mass and we become the individual. But it takes a long time to work yourself up to be a distinctive individuality. Isolated identity with the soul is that of the disciple up to and including the third initiation. I just think that's so important, and I keep on sort of forgetting it. But isolated identity with the soul. I am the soul. I am the soul. How many times did DK say it? In the various mantrams, I am the soul. And, but are we? If you stop for just a moment, what are you? I have a name, I have a form, I have a way of thinking, I have a way of feeling. Am I the personality? Or is there something more? Am I really the soul? Isolated identity, and not just the individuality of a distinctive and perhaps reasonably highly developed person. So let everybody test himself, herself. Let everybody test. What am I? No, it's I am. That's sort of isolated, a type of isolated individuality. I am that. That is definitely isolated identity. I am that I am. I am that and that I am. That's isolated unity. And so Leo is so important. It's in a way the most human sign, and we go through these different stages of it. And that fifth petal is a dramatic moment where you move from a kind of separative individualism into a crash and burn, and then move on into real discipleship, a higher form of isolated individuality, leading to real identification as the soul, as the initiations proceed, and then finally, as we really get into the jewel and the lotus, fourth initiation, contact with the monad, the seeing isolated unity as more than a theory. Even at the third degree, isolated unity can begin its process of growth within our nature. All right. So let's see what we have here. What I'm going to do, I'm going to call this the end of first initiation compilation program number 1, and this is the 22nd of June. We're into the sign Cancer, and here we have the beginning of First Initiation Compilation Program 2, and I'm not sure what day this will be on. I always hope it's the same day. I used to make these really long programs, even up to 5 hours, but I was driving the transcribers crazy, so there's no sense to do that. All right, we're into the first initiation now, and associated thoughts. Obviously, we're not, rigidly following a kind of outline in which we only discuss the first initiation, so that in any of these discussions, other initiations will come up and their relation to the first initiation. But that is our main thought, and the paragraphs here are on the first initiation primarily. Okay, thank you. See you soon. Bye-bye.